So I'm here to talk about philanthropy. And I noticed on the website for this gathering that I was identified as a philanthropist. And I imagine that many of you, if not all, I don't know, looked at that and thought, that's not really relevant to my life, my interests. What the heck is she doing here? And that word philanthropy suggests an abundance of riches. That one has just so much money that you don't need it and you can give it away. And my experience with philanthropy is quite different. Okay. My experience is, that's much better, thank you. My experience is much different, and certainly I'm not in that category I just described. So I would like to share my story with you, and it might change your way of thinking about philanthropy. So my story starts about 15 years ago. My husband asked me to help him administer a small foundation. He had been on the board for many years. His parents had been the trustees. And upon their passing, the responsibility for it fell upon him. So he asked me if I would help, and sure. I mean, to be given the resources to be able to donate to organizations that you admire was really a wonderful opportunity. So that first year, he set aside a sum of money and said I could donate to any organization of my choosing. Yes. So here I am 15 years later, and I still remember the first 3 checks that I wrote. One was to Doctors Without Borders, Women to Women International, and Seeds of Peace. All 3 organizations I still admire a great deal. So in the 5 minutes that it took me to write those 3 checks, my heart swelled with pride. You know, I was tickled that I would be able to do something like this. And then I mailed the checks, and that was that. And about a month later, is this okay?
Yeah.
No?
No?
No, it's the echo, so move a little bit closer to you.
Can we turn it up at all?
No, it's just twisted.
Oh,
There we go.
okay.
You just let me know if it doesn't work.
Can you guys hear?
Yeah.
That's okay. A month after I mailed those letters, those checks, I received letters of thanks and acknowledgement. And soon after, I started receiving solicitation letters asking me for more. And I'm still getting those letters, and I've moved twice, and somehow they always find me. So that was my first experience with philanthropy. Fast forward to about 5.5 years ago, December of 2011, and my husband and I moved to Sonoma, and I didn't know anyone. So I decided to join a women's group. It's called Impact 100. It's a women's giving circle. And the concept is to bring 100 women together. You each chip in $1,000, and together you decide which local nonprofit organization you'll donate a grant of $100,000, an amount that's intended to make a very big impact. At the time, there were 240 members, so I thought this was a great way to get to know, to meet other women, hopefully to make some friends, get to know Sonoma, and get to know the amazing nonprofits. This was a new chapter in my life. It's called retirement. I was looking for something. I was hoping to find an organization that really resonated with me, that aligned with my interests. I wanted to do something meaningful, purposeful in my life, and I was hoping that by joining this group, I would find my way. And so that first year, I joined a committee that reviewed all the grant applications for that $100,000 grant. And wow, was that an eye-opener. First of all, I learned about the amazing nonprofit organizations in this small town of Sonoma. And we're talking about the valley, not the county. So there's a population of 10 to 12,000 in this small town. And I discovered something really interesting, that Sonoma is not only about food and wine and beautiful vistas and destination weddings. Half the population was living in poverty. And of course, when you go there on a weekend or a day trip, you don't see that. If you're a part-timer, you just don't appreciate that. So also in that first year, as part of the grant evaluation process, I attended a site visit at a preschool classroom of 4-year-olds. They had applied, the district had applied for a grant to expand the number of classrooms, and I went and observed this adorable classroom of kids. And they were mostly Latino children. Their parents were vineyard workers, house cleaners, landscapers, hotel workers. They spoke Spanish at home and in their neighborhoods. And as I watched the classroom, I saw firsthand how crucial this year of learning was before kindergarten. It got them ready to learn. And I realized that with this extra year, these kids had as good a chance as anybody on the other side of town, in a more affluent part of town, to have a thriving academic life and a full life. There was a level playing field. And I became right then and there just passionate about the need for universal preschool in our country. And I immediately joined the Sonoma Valley Education Foundation to help promote and raise money to help expand the number of classrooms for the preschoolers. So fast forward again to my third year of living in Sonoma, and I was invited to join the board of directors, and I jumped at the chance because I love the concept of women coming together to make things happen, to effect change. And we all cared so much about our community. And so it was an endeavor that I was happy to jump into. So what I loved about it most was in the committees for evaluating the proposals, the discussions and debates over which organizations would make the best use of our money. It was really an intellectual, it wasn't challenging, but it was delightful. Everybody was very generous in their spirit and listening to each other and respecting opinions. And we all shared a common purpose, was to support our community. But what I loved best about my participation in this group were that I met so many interesting women. Some of them, and these were ages from maybe 30 to 85, some of them had just incredible accomplishments and careers behind them. And some of them, I later learned, were quite wealthy. They had family foundations, and others were paying their annual donation of $1,000 in monthly increments. But what was so cool about this organization was that you really didn't know how anybody was paying. We were all in this together. We had a shared purpose. We donated the same amount of money, and we all had one vote, and we all cared very deeply about what we were doing. But something else in this third year of participating in this group and in my new hometown of Sonoma, something else was happening that was very interesting for me personally. I began running into people that I know around town, at the gym, at the farmer's market, in the grocery store. And there was this, at first there'd be a wave of acknowledgement. We'd stop and chat. Sometimes we would make plans to get together socially for a coffee or a hike. And before I knew it, I had friends and I had acquaintances. And people recognized me and I knew them. And I had this real sense that I have a connection, that I had a community. This was my community. And this was the first time I can honestly say that I felt that way about where I lived. 1 minute left, oh my gosh. I've always lived in big cities, and certainly New York, in case you didn't notice, New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco. I've lived in big cities and never really had anything invested in other people's well-being or prosperity. But that's really not the case right now. And for the first time in my life, and I'm now in my 60s, that I feel this deep sense of connection to where I live. And so I asked, how did this happen? I joined a giving circle. I made a donation of $1,000, and I participated in this group. And in a small way, I feel like with others, I've made a very big difference in a lot of people's lives in Sonoma. And what is so interesting about this is that when you think about a charitable donation, there's the beneficiary, there's the donor. And in this case, I feel that both of us had a return on investment. I feel that this has my participation and my $1,000 donation has enriched my life. And if I were to exaggerate just a little bit, I would say that it changed my life because I've gained a community, I've made new friends, and I've gained a pursuit to which I devote many hours a week as a leader of this organization now. So what I'd like to close with, if you'll give me 20 more seconds, recently I read a book. I came across a quote that I thought was lovely, and I wanted to share it with you today. And it's from a book called Love Where You Live. And in it, the author points to philanthropy as a measure of what he calls a lovable community. And he writes, "A giving community is a lovable community because its members have a generous spirit and have learned to look beyond themselves to see the interconnectedness of all the community's members." It's a lovely quote, and he describes really how I feel about my new hometown of Sonoma and my new life as a philanthropist. Thank you for listening. I'm delighted to share my story with you.